Audio Unleashed.
Are you going to bring us in this week?
Sure.
All right, run with something, man. We're recording.
As we wait. What am I going to say here?
Do you want me to do the intro for you, just so you're primed to
I'll do it. Let me do it. Come on, man. I'm an improviser. I can perform under pressure. I'm not a schmo.
No, I'm just saying, prime the pump. Give you the audio unleashed. And
yeah,
then
we've
you
already
say
heard
words.
that, theoristically.
I know, but you haven't heard it right now.
So we can officially say this is Audio
Unleashed.
And I'm Brent.
And I'm Dennis.
And we're here to talk about audio stuff that we find interesting.
Yeah, and hopefully other people find interesting.
And hopefully, they will. They will. Yeah. We are thought leaders in audio.
That's terrifying.
Sadly, at war with many other thought leaders in audio whose thoughts are less smart than ours.
Yeah. Their thoughts are not leading. Their thoughts are following.
Right, their thoughts are following, but a few people whose thoughts conflict with ours, but whom we respect and cherish.
Mm-hmm.
So we have the whole potpourri of audio opinion on this show, which we present. I was going to say without judgment, but that would be a lie.
That would be a big lie. But hey, maybe we need to lean into that. Maybe we just need to tell a lie so big that people will have to believe it,
Okay, so what's our first lie of this episode going to be?
Actually, this is a truth. So I came across this article in the Miami New Times. Don't ask me why. I stumbled across the Miami New Times, but the headline just grabbed me and wouldn't let me go. The listening bar at Kaori may be Miami's best audiophile bar yet. And I was just like, what, huh? There are enough of them that we're now ranking them by best. I thought that was pretty cool. So I just threw it in the idea board before I even read the thing. But then I read the article and it's pretty cool. It's in the basement of a restaurant. There's like a Japanese theme. The design principles are all based on wabi-sabi. I just thought it'd be kind of cool to talk about this as a trend. So we kind of hinted at it before in a previous segment on our previous podcast, but hey, here's a chance to dig back in again.
Well, I was shocked. I was shocked when you sent this to me.
Yeah.
Because I thought, okay, if there's an audiophile bar in the U.S., it's within 4 blocks of Steve Guttenberg's apartment. And he's there like all the time.
He's like the norm. Yeah. He walks in and people are like, Steve.
And it's all full of people that look and act like Steve Guttenberg.
Yeah. Turns out no, though. It's in a bougie neighborhood in Miami, and they're all using speakers made in the state of Georgia, which is fascinating.
This is in the Brickell neighborhood of Miami.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Which is where all the super ultra mega high rises where the apartments start at like $1.5 million or something.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, this is a fascinating thing. And we're going to dig deep into like what kind of gear they're using, what kind of music they're playing, where else these things exist, and whether or not we think this is worth checking out. So from there, we're going to go.
Man.
Okay, segment 2 is one I masterminded. I stumbled upon because this guy named Oliver Clark contacted me through LinkedIn. He wanted to chat about like audio writing and stuff. And I said, fine, because I'm a, eminence grise of audio writing at this point, at least for some people. And so we chatted, and it turned out he has been deeply involved with a field that I have tried to learn about, but failed because I just haven't been able to find people that know anything about it, which is audio product recycling. And so he has some interesting tales for us, both of some of the cool stuff that he has found in the course of his job, and also how realistic the whole audio product recycling thing is. And this is what I've been wondering about, because we've worked on this a little bit in my work at Wirecutter, trying to figure out how recyclable these audio products are. And most of the manufacturers I contacted were like, oh yeah, we've been kind of wanting to figure that out too. Which you would think. And then although some of them sent me like, here's our webpage about sustainability. Which, of course, do we have one of those for the Audio Unleashed podcast?
Not yet. Not
we
yet.
should do that.
Yeah. I'm trying to reduce methane emissions from Bruno. I think that's what I'm doing to help the climate. So.
Good. But a lot of these things I've kind of been like, that doesn't amount to too much more than, reducing methane emissions from Bruno. Who's Dennis's dog, by the way, not like, person.
Well, there's no cause for that kind of language.
Okay.
Hey, why don't you introduce segment 3, since you brought this one in, and I'll do the Patreon thing.
Okay. So segment 3 is we were, I was reading as I do the Stereophile website just to find out what's going on in audio that I haven't found out about. And the Capital AudioFest just wrapped up in Washington, D.C., which I have not been to, but I'm told that it's quite a successful show. Pulling a lot of East Coast high rollers in, and is it like the highest, one of the highest income towns is like one of the suburbs of Washington, D.C.?
I think that's right, yeah.
Because, government. And, not necessarily the people employed. Well, true, but not necessarily the people employed in government, but the people employed in trying to influence the people in government.
Yes.
So a lot of lobbyists out there buying $50,000 speakers, I guess. And so anyway, Stereophile had as they usually do, a pretty extensive report by a couple different writers talking about some of the different products that were there, and it's a real look at what the state of audio shows is and what the state of high-end audio is. And of course, we're going to offer our insight into that, whatever that might be, and look at some of these products and talk about the trends and stuff like that, which is what we're kind of supposed to do here at Audio
Unleashed.
So what's our Patreon segment going to be?
So I was perusing Reddit because one of us has to, and it's not going to be you.
It's not going to be me. No way.
And I came across a really interesting thread called Ken Fritz $1 Million Stereo Auctioning Off. So a couple of years ago, there was this documentary about this $1 million music system in this guy's house. And now, apparently, he is no longer with us, unfortunately, and his system is being auctioned off piecemeal. That in and of itself is interesting, but I thought the Reddit conversation was kind of interesting and fascinating, which has led to links to conversations in AVS forum. And so, I don't know, there's a lot to talk about here, a lot to deconstruct. But yeah, I thought it'd be a fun thing to talk about, but I think it's kind of the thing probably our patrons are more interested in than the average Audio Unleashed listener. So yeah, we're going to dig into that and have some fun and tell you what we think about it.
I'll have to confess, I did not read I looked at the articles about this, but I did not read the conversations.
Okay.
I know this will surprise you.
No, it's okay. It's okay. You probably would have needed an antacid to make it through. So
I'm dying to hear what people said about this stuff.
Yeah.
Save it. Patrons only.
Yeah. Let's go down to Miami, man. At least virtually.
All right.
At least in our minds. What's that old James Taylor song? In my mind, I'm going to Carolina. Right now, in my mind, I'm going to Miami.
Going to Carolina in my mind, something like that.
Yeah.
And then but I'm thinking more like Miami Sound Machine, who had, of course, had the hits that
the rhythm is going to get you.
Yeah. Rhythm is going to get you. Yes. And I haven't heard that music in a long time.
Away. Yeah.
I don't actually remember that at all.
Yeah. Away. Away, oh, wow.
Wait, but there's kind of like the rhythm is gonna get you. Rhythm is gonna get you tonight. Dun, 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 something like that, right?
You're a little rushed there, but you basically got it. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I'm
Gloria Estefan had a little bit more swing than you did.
Singing. Okay. Well, I'm just trying to give our listeners the impression, trying to set the mood. And now we're down on the coast of Miami. Well, Miami is the coast. And what did you find in Miami?
So let me just read some of the intro here because this is fascinating. So there's a lot of stuff here that I was just reading going, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. So just right from the intro, other spots have offered their take on the Japanese record bar, from the intimate Miami sound bar to the clubby Jolene, both in downtown. But the listening bar at Kaori feels different, more thoughtful, more comfortable, more communal. And anyway, this just goes on to talk about how there's this bar, and yeah, they've tried to create something that's a little more intimate, a little more sit down. It doesn't get loud, but I think the whole point of it is to sort of sit quietly in an inviting environment and listen to music and sort of experience sound. And I think that's fascinating. But again, I think the most surprising thing to me, like if this had been just like a one-off, right? Hey, we're building a new bar in Miami that's an audiophile bar, I've been like, that's really cool. But to see a headline that this is the best one yet, I'm like, wait a minute. This is a trend that I feel like I'm behind on. So
yeah, me too. But
what was
interesting.
What was the most fascinating thing about this to you?
I really want to check this out because I welcome it, and it's kind of cool. And because so many commercial establishments, lots of bars, every bar I guess plays music, but the music system is usually an afterthought. It's usually ceiling speakers or who knows what, maybe a bad PA or something. But these places are using, I don't want to say audiophile gear, but they're using stuff that's either got a semblance of cool about it, or it's designed to sort of be a less sort of mass markety, more probably quality oriented approach to commercial audio systems. And
kind of boutique.
I had to look up the company that made the system in this bar in Miami, because I saw pictures of it, and it's like, oh, they're like a cube-shaped speaker hanging from the ceiling, and they're made from wood, and they're probably coaxial. And what the hell are these things?
Yeah.
And I found that the system is made by a company in Georgia called Danley Sound Labs, who maybe I've heard of. I can't remember. I don't do a lot of stuff with commercial audio. I mean, I have done a little bit, but not a whole lot. And they make mostly stuff for like sports arenas. They do have like one audiophile speaker in their line. It's like a big, weird looking pyramid-shaped tower thing with like a slot array in the front or something. It's a really strange-looking speaker. It looks like it probably works, though, from an acoustical standpoint. But if you look at their applications, they say touring and production, house of worship, sports venues, performing arts centers, nightclubs and hospitality, theme parks, blah, blah. So this is a pro sound company, except they are selling this as something that's audiophile. Whether it is or not, I can't. And they're dressing them up more like audiophile speakers, with wood cabinets and things, which you would never find in a pro system. And I'm kind of dying to hear this because, like, there's no reason those wouldn't sound good. I mean, of course, depends on how they tune them, and a lot of pro stuff is made to play really loud and be really lightweight and be really reliable. And sound quality is second.
Did you get the impression that I did that they're kind of trying to go for the look of like a DeVore or something like that? That was the first thing I thought when I saw those cubes.
It's like they're DeVore fidelity. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So you could take these things off of their mounting brackets and show them and put a couple ferns next to them in a hotel room. And then turn off all the lights in the room except for like a couple little lights shining up at the speakers and the ferns, and throw I didn't see if these were. I think these are internally powered, right? These are active speakers.
Yeah.
But
most of their stuff is. Yeah.
Well, you'd need to have a tube DAC or something, so you got to have some tubes glowing, and people would probably walk in and go, "Oh my God, amazing." But I don't know what they sound like. But I am dying to. I mean, I don't get down to Miami much. I haven't been to Miami in like 20 years. So it might be underwater by the next time I get there. So
yeah. One of the coolest things about this story for me is that, I'm not a vinyl guy, but I thought it was really, really cool. They've got a collection of 130,000 vinyl records, and basically guests can sort of get a ticket and go and get to pick a record out from the collection and hand it to, the person that's operating the sound system, and they'll put the record on and play it for you, sort of like a a human jukebox, if you will. I thought that was pretty neat, and I think experiences like that are cool because I think we talked about this before, and I wrote an article about it for Soundstage. There's this hi-fi shop near me called Classic Audio and Records, and every last Sunday of the month they do listening parties, and I was having trouble navigating around people enough to take photos. There were so many people there, and
wow,
it was just really cool. Everybody was super excited to share their record with the group that was there, and so I think there's something to that. It's like now at this bar, unlike the listening party, people aren't bringing their records from home, but I still think there's something neat and intimate in a weird way about saying, hey, I picked this record because I want all of you people to listen to it, and then they listen to it. So I think, I don't know if this is a common thing with these audiophile bars, especially in the US, but I think it's a really cool thing, and I'd like to see more of people like actively engaged in picking the music that everybody's listening to, because that's cool and communal and weird to me.
I kind of like that. I like hearing random music picks by other people, and I kind of court that. I always ask people like what music they listen to, and I try to, like, since I have Spotify, I can check out stuff so quickly. But I was looking at, apparently there's a place called Brilliant Corners in London, which is one of the leading ones of these so-called jazz kissa bars, which I guess that's a trend that started in Japan like decades ago, like 50 years ago or something.
Don't know if that was long ago, but it was definitely, we talked about it a little when we did the piece on Corner Club Cathedral Cocoon by Sasha Fair Jones when we were doing the Soundstage podcast.
God. Yeah, that guy. Oy. So this is called Brilliant Corners, which, being the erudite and culturally sophisticated person I am, I know that's the name of a Thelonious Monk song.
I did not know that.
I can't hum it though.
My wife would know that, but she's the big Thelonious Monk fan.
It's got a lot of like seventh chords in it and stuff. And weird rhythms, probably. Anyway,
cool.
So, but I was looking at their list, and it's definitely and listening to some of the tunes, and it's definitely kind of like chill jazz stuff. It's a little bit like the Butterburger house band if we weren't so weird.
Nice.
It's what did you call that music? Lo-fi beats?
Yeah, lo-fi. Well, yeah, lo-fi jazz, lo-fi beats, whatever. Yeah,
it's kind of like that.
There's a billion and one subgenres there.
Yeah, it's not like, I guess you can go in these places. Obviously, if they have 130,000 records, they probably have Miles Davis something or another, and you can go and you can hear Miles going beep, 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 whatever. But then you can also hear a lot of this whatever. And, that's my impression of lo-fi jazz. And
nice.
I could make a living doing that, just doing it like with mouth beats and stuff. I'm doing a whole album. You could be
the Bobby McFerrin of lo-fi jazz.
I'm going to do a whole album like that, and I can do it in 45 minutes. I just got to put on a microphone and hit record, right?
The only request, you got to do a cover of "Don't Worry, Be Happy." That's all I ask of you. But like a lo-fi jazz cover, yeah.
Do I have to doesn't he kind of like beat his chest?
Yeah, that's the
kind of like when he does it, sort of. I haven't seen that in a long time. How about that? But so there's a lot. Anyway, this is kind of a cool trend. I think this is hip. I want to find like one of these in the Seattle area. I'm not positive there is one, but I also live in close proximity to Portland, and you got to think there's one of these places in Portland, for God's sake.
Yeah, there's got to be
probably a bunch.
But there's probably like an elephant head on the wall of the one in Portland.
Yeah. Yeah.
Portland's weird, man, in a way that I love, but it's weird.
I want to check this out, and maybe, I don't know, it'd be fun to do a real story on this, but go to like this is the kind of thing I could have done when I was freelancing, like travel to different cities on a big road trip and go to their jazz kissa bars and profile them and write about it and like, laud some of their awesome audio systems and ridicule some of their bad audio systems, which there's got to be both.
Yeah.
But I gotta say, I think this is a lot bigger in Asia than here. Obviously, the jazz kissa term comes from Japan, but I remember I was in Suwon, South Korea, and cognoscenti can figure out why I was in Suwon, South Korea, and but I was in a hotel there, and I think it was a kind of fairly generic hotel. I think it actually maybe even was like an American, like Ramada or something like that, right? It was a pretty decent hotel, and they had a bar downstairs that had a full-on B&W 800 system. It was like maybe like 802s were the main speakers, and they had whatever the matching center speaker was and surround speakers. And so you could listen to music on it. However, it was also set up for karaoke.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Wow.
So you could do karaoke through these super high-end B&W speakers that are probably, I think they were probably $15,000 a pair at the time. And they had it all playing through like some kind of super high-end, I think it was an Onkyo or Denon receiver. But, like one of the $5,000 ones or something, right? But it was, and the receiver I think it had a karaoke like input on it. I did not perform karaoke on this because I was busy working frantically.
Man, I was about to say, I just realized you and I have never done karaoke before together. We've got to rectify that.
We've got to rectify Asia.
That. Well, first we'd have to go to Asia.
Yeah, well, that's part of the whole deal. You can do it in, but you don't want to do karaoke in just any place. I think you want to do, like, I've done karaoke in Koreatown in LA, and that was awesome. It's like being in Korea, but there's more space. And they had like, what is it? Hit beer, whatever, from Korea. And it was like mostly Korean people in there, and they had like cool lighting. It was a lot of fun. It was really cool.
I've only ever done karaoke in like bars with peanut shells on the floor, so I've never had the sort of Asian karaoke experience. I dream too.
Dude, I've done karaoke in Korea with Jeff Morrison. Was I in Korea or Japan?
I'm so jealous right now.
I think I was in Japan. I was probably in Japan, and we performed.
Even better.
We performed together. We performed Blitzkrieg Bop.
Nice.
Of course.
Nice. I am literally green with jealousy right now.
And then I performed Highway Star.
Nice. Very cool.
Yes.
I think we've strayed off topic a little bit, buddy. Do you want to?
We probably did.
Yeah. Do you want to go take a break real quick and refocus?
Yeah, we'll take a break, and we will come back with talking recycling with Oliver Clark.
I'm excited about this one.
Me too. Welcome back. This is Audio
Unleashed.
And we have with us a very special guest who is an expert in an area that I've been fascinated by and curious about, but have never found anybody who knew what they were talking about. And that is electronics recycling. And so we have a guy on here that I met on LinkedIn named Oliver Clark. And Oliver is from New York City. And Oliver, who do you work for?
I work for, it's basically New York City's oldest, biggest, and longest standing publicly funded e-waste recycling program.
Okay. Does it have a name?
It is the Lower East Side Ecology Center.
Oh, okay.
Oh, nice.
And so what do you do on a day-to-day basis?
So my lovely day starts at 6:30 a.m. as I battle the nuisance of public transportation here in New York City. But basically, once we get to the location, we set up, we put out pallets, and then people come by and they drop off all their items. We sort it into bins on the pallets, and then at the end of the day, it all goes onto a truck and it gets taken off to be dismantled and broken down further.
So I wanted to have you on because, I've worked for various, websites or whatever that wanted to kind of talk about the sustainability of electronics. And I've actually tried to get answers from manufacturers about that. And a lot of them were just like, we've been thinking about that, but we really don't know. And they just basically, for the most part, they just make this stuff and send it out there and don't really care what happens to it. And then some manufacturers have been saying, oh, well, we're a member of this green sustainable recycle association something and we use recyclable plastics in something and all this stuff. And I know that some of them are really greenwashing, which is basically coming up with some kind of PR spin that lets them give excuses for why they're not really doing anything. So we have a lot to talk about because you have, through your work, you have scrounged some pretty incredible gear. Is that right?
Yeah, it's pretty unbelievable the kinds of things that people drop off. I mean, things as old as 1920 to things as recent as, last year.
Wow. So what are some of the really choice things that you've found that people have dropped off?
I mean, the things that get dropped off pretty much coincide with the release of new devices. So, when Apple came out with the iPhone 15, we got in a huge wave of like old iPhone 10s up until 12s. But in terms of audio equipment, Pioneer receivers, Sansui, some Macintosh equipment, Tandberg, really a bit of everything in various forms of decay, meaning it's either in great shape or it looks like it came from the Titanic.
So does sometimes does it work?
If I'm lucky, yep, it's plug and play. Other times it might need some work, and that could be as simple as just cleaning the controls or a full recap, full power supply rebuild. It all depends.
So, Oliver, I'm curious about something. The stuff that people bring in that somehow ends up, in your hands. How does that process work? Do you have to buy it from the company that you're working for, or how does that work?
So, there's a little backstory. So, they've been doing these collection events for forever. And they used to have a warehouse in Brooklyn, in Gowanus. And so what would happen originally is they would collect all this stuff and they'd bring it back to their warehouse where they would test it and either, sell it in a reuse store or rent out older items as props. And of course, the funds from that warehouse would go towards the greater goal of just sustainability and, and things like that. So I worked there from when I was 12 up until COVID when, Brooklyn being Brooklyn, it got very expensive and the landlord refused to sell us just that one warehouse. And so we unfortunately had to close the doors and the warehouse is now gone and it's destined to become a yoga studio or an overpriced loft apartment. But when I was, 12 years old, I was walking down the street and I passed by one of their collection events. So just imagine 12-year-old Oliver seeing a bunch of stereos and speakers sitting on the ground. So I went over there and I met my lovely boss, Christine, and she offered me a volunteer position. So every day, I went to middle school in Brooklyn. So every day after school, I'd walk over there from Brooklyn Heights to, Gowanus, and I would test and refurbish audio equipment for them to resell. But, times have changed. The warehouse is gone and I continue to work with them. Unfortunately, we have no warehouse, so there's no reuse side of things. But, just due to my unique relationship with this company and with this organization, I am allowed to, save these bits of audio equipment from being, scrapped, basically.
So you have a YouTube channel where
I do.
you talk about some of this stuff, and you actually pull drivers out of all sorts of random products and test the speaker drivers. And it's really, so what are you pulling these drivers out of? What kind of products, and how do they perform?
So yeah, that's kind of the other side of my, I guess you could say, my audio salvage passion. I drag home a bunch of old audio equipment, and then on the other end, I'm pulling, speakers out of high-end televisions, smart speakers, Bluetooth speakers, things like that. And, I've been doing this for, 10 years, and I've definitely seen a change in just the design and the level of precision with which some of these drivers are built.
You're sort of like torture testing these things, right?
Yeah, I'm definitely pushing them harder than they were ever designed to be pushed. And obviously, I have no DSP going with them. They're not in an enclosure, so they're just free air. And so obviously they're not going to sound as good. But it's still pretty fun to see just how they perform their excursion, what their motor force is like, how clean the excursion is. And that's kind of what I talk about on my YouTube channel, but also on my TikTok.
Oh, so how do people find your YouTube and your TikTok?
So my YouTube channel I made that a long time ago. It's called the Speaker Seeker. And my TikTok is base_vids.
Okay. And we'll put links to those into the show notes as well. So, all right, now here's a tough question. You're at the heart of, the whole recycling thing. But like I was saying before, we've heard so many claims about recyclability of some of these products, and some of these products I look at and I'm like, there's nothing you could recycle, or there's very little here that you could recycle without spending a colossal amount of time and energy to disassemble it and all that. So how much, just looking at typical audio products, how much of that is really recyclable?
Well, for reference, I guess the method of recycling electronics has changed. It used to be, manual disassembly, and that is used for things like computers where people want to reuse chips and other components that still have value. But for things that really have no value in terms of metals and things like that, like audio equipment, printers, things like that, they usually just get put into a giant shredder. And then they use magnets and, gusts of air to separate the different, metals and plastics and ferrous metals and non-ferrous metals and things like that. But to answer your question, it really depends both on what the local legislation is, but also on what the user or owner of the item does with it. So most people can go online and check their local legislation to see what kind of, e-waste programs are available near them. And most towns and counties will have, a transfer station or a local dump, and that'll have an area where people can drop off their little TVs, computers, and things like that. But it's really up to the owner to do their research and really make sure that, these companies or these recyclers aren't, again, like you say, greenwashing.
Yeah.
But, with audio, it's interesting because computers get phased out very quickly because the software is incompatible with new machines and vice versa. Technology is always changing. But, with audio equipment, the only things that are changing are maybe amplifier technology, DSPs, and things like that. So they still remain pretty relevant. And so I feel like recycling with things like audio really means reusing. Whereas with computers, recycling means dismantling and shredding for precious metals and things like that.
Oliver, have you found that the recyclability of audio products has changed over, let's say, the decades? I mean, I'm looking at your YouTube channel. You've got this beautiful Sansui 5500 on there. And then there's the newer stuff. Do you find that the older stuff is more recyclable than the newer stuff, or does it make a difference?
So I haven't really taken apart much newer equipment, but I think the difference is that a lot of the older stuff was really meant to be repaired, whereas the newer stuff is, you can get 3 or 4 years out of it, depending on the model or the brand. And then once it's out, it's time for a new one.
Yeah.
I was talking to Dan Loftman from Emotiva a few years ago, and he said at one point they had purchased a soundbar from a popular soundbar manufacturer because they just wanted to take it apart and see what it was like on the inside, like what's going on in the inside of these soundbars. And he said it not only did it take them an hour to get it apart, once they were done, there was just no putting it back together, right? He said, a product like that should have had 25 screws and it had like 250. And he was like, there's just no way you're ever putting this thing back together. And, whereas a lot of the old gear, man, it's 4 screws and you're done. So I'm wondering if you see much of that as you're going through this gear and sort of deciding like what to pull out and what is a lost cause.
100%. So, what you're talking about with like the newer stuff, that's because they don't want technicians or you or anyone to get inside and fix it. Because if you fix it, you're not buying a new one. And if you're not buying a new one, that company's not going to make as much money. So, covering screws and glue, using, proprietary screws, hiding screws. These are all techniques that are meant to deter anybody from getting inside and fixing that product. But with the older stuff, it's much more modular. It's like you said, 4 screws and it's open. So there's definitely a big difference with the older stuff and the newer stuff when it comes to ease of getting it apart, but also ease of fixing it.
So do you have like a percentage of like what amount of audio gear that comes in a typical recycling operation? How much of it just goes into the shredder and how much of it is actually repurposed? Just wild guess.
So it's funny. Here in New York City, you kind of see more of certain things depending on the neighborhood. If we have an event in Manhattan, we're going to get a lot of newer stuff. But somewhere like Queens or Brooklyn, where people actually have room for this bigger audio stuff, that's where we'll tend to see more of the Pioneer, the Sansui, or just other like bigger speakers. But I want to be clear that it's not like every day I'm seeing massive Pioneer and Macintosh amps coming through. If that was the case, my room would be a lot more cluttered than it is now.
Yeah.
Most of what I'm seeing is like black plastic crap, AV receivers from the 90s and, boom boxes and things like that. So that kind of stuff that ends up getting, recycled and taken apart for the metals and plastics. And that's I'd say probably 80% of what we're getting in. And most of it it doesn't work. It wasn't meant to work long term. But what's interesting is I found recently a Knight mono tube amp with a matching mono tuner from 1959. I also found a small TIAC kind of DAC integrated amp combo from 3 years ago.
Ooh.
That doesn't work. Wow. That doesn't work anymore. It did not turn on. But the all original tube Knight receiver from 50 years ago that was sitting in someone's basement works just fine.
Oh, that's funny.
And it's all original. It's really, it shocked me. I think it speaks volumes to just the level of craftsmanship that, these things were built with.
So you had a website that you wanted to talk about and that you wanted us to drop in a link to. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So the company I work with, we're a nonprofit and, we get funding from local politicians, senators, the city, the Department of Sanitation. But unfortunately, recent budget cuts by our mayor have resulted in education, composting, and therefore any public e-waste events we have, we're facing a reduction in funding. So we have a petition that is basically a way of getting people to show support for our efforts and what we do. And by signing that petition, you're basically telling the mayor, hey, we need this, we want this. This is important to us. We don't want you to cut funding from programs like the Lower East Side Ecology Center's e-waste recycling, and then the various composting programs like Grow MIC, Big Reuse, things like that. because
Cool.
it is important. And, we do these things to make it convenient and easy for people. And when things are convenient and easy, they're more likely to do the right thing that's, eco-friendly and things like that. Because if, recycling your TV means driving an hour to the dump, they're not going to do that. And they'd much rather just leave it on the street and, make it someone else's problem.
Yeah.
Which is sad, but it's the reality.
Yeah. Well, hey, thanks for coming on. And
thanks, Oliver.
Thanks for having me.
And keep us posted on what you're doing. You're like going in directions that other people aren't going, and that's always really cool.
Thank you. Yeah, it's definitely a niche world. It's a way to kind of blend my passion for audio, but also for sustainability, because I like the idea that all this nice equipment isn't going to go to waste. And, if I drag something home that I don't like, I'll give it to someone or sell to someone at a very, very cheap discount, because, people have this idea that you have to spend a lot of money to get good sound, but that's not necessarily true. And if I can give someone a pair of like Minimus 7s and a small mini amp to use in the living room.
Yeah, man, don't get me salivating, okay? I used to have those things. I loved them. Oh my God, this Radio Shack.
They come in all the time, and I've given so many pairs to so many people.
Oh wow!
And if that's enough to get people to care about music more and to care more about what they're listening to music on, then I've done my job.
You have done your job. Well, thanks again, and we're going to take a quick break, and we will be right back. And we're back. This is Audio
Unleashed.
And I am Brent Butterworth.
And I'm Dennis Berger.
Yes. So we're here in our third segment to talk about the Capital AudioFest, which just wrapped in Washington, D.C. Sadly, neither of us were there. And that is a bad thing because we both kind of should have been there, but the realities of our lives intersect with all these things, and basically my current employers don't pay me to go to audio shows. So, which is a drag, because audio shows are fun. Always lots of fun and always interesting. And this one looks like it was fun, but we thought we would look at some of so Stereophile had some pretty ace reporting on this from Kim McAuliffe, who is one of the writers and also a very, very esteemed jazz writer who, like me, used to write for Jazz Times before Jazz Times sadly imploded. Oh, I miss Jazz Times. But they have some nice write-ups in here of a bunch of gear. And so I kind of picked out some gear. I don't know if you looked at this, but I picked out some stuff that I thought was interesting and sort of gave us a little bit of perspective on the state of the high-end audio business. And did you look over these things?
I did. I looked over the ones that you linked to, and I looked over some ones that you didn't link to as well.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Well, I want you to bring out some. I wanted to start. May I start with the Treehouse Audio Lab?
Please do.
Speaker. So this is there's a brand called Treehouse. That's CREEHAUS. And you can see all this stuff at stereophile.com, by the way, for free. Thank you, Stereophile. It was this stuff is really, I don't want to say it's as weird as that was it Blue Circle Audio by Angela Gilbert Young that we featured a couple of episodes ago that looked like an integrated amp that somebody had squirted like multicolored caulk all over, which probably works perfectly fine, but it looked really weird because it was supposed to look weird. This stuff doesn't look quite that weird, and they have the Phantom of Luxury field coil loudspeakers for $29,000 a pair.
Mm-hmm.
I don't quite get the title Phantom of Luxury. No,
Yeah.
Do we know what a field coil loudspeaker is, first of all?
What is a field coil
I'll explain.
loudspeaker?
So with a normal loudspeaker, you have a magnet, a permanent magnet in there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you have a voice coil that goes around it, that's wrapped around a tube that goes around the permanent magnet. And when you run some AC through the voice coil, it moves the whole cone back and forth. Well, with a field coil loudspeaker, there's no permanent magnet. It's an electromagnet, right? So you have to plug them into power to get them to work, even though they're not powered speakers per se, right? And this was a very common design, back in, of course, like the 1920s, 100 years ago or something. And I am not entirely sure why. I guess at the time it was easier to do electromagnets than permanent magnets. So anyway, but some people think that somehow, of course, with high-end audio, there's a lot of people that think like anything that was from 100 or 80 years ago must be better than anything now. So these kind of subscribe to that thing, and they have a 10-inch full range field coil driver. So 10-inch full range field coil driver, a 15-inch woofer, and Fostex T900A super tweeters. And then they have their own preamp and their own amp and their own phono amp and things like that. But it's really, did you look at the speaker?
I did, and I looked at another post on Twittering Machines about it. You could definitely see it from the back and sort of see the open baffle design a little better.
Yeah, so it's a weird looking thing. It looks like a bunch of pieces of log kind of glued all together, a bunch of logs glued together, and then have some kind of stuff in between them to fill in the cracks, and then they saw off a slice of that. So it's really kind of organic and strange. And on one side of it, on one of the four sides, it's got a kind of curvy natural thing that follows the wood. And I guess these are all individual units that all look different, but the you can look at this and you can tell that this is, now they talk about how great the sound was, right? So the problem is,
it's not every day that you don't often read these show reports and are like, the sound was kind of crap. I mean, the sound is always amazing. The sound is always the best thing they've ever heard. So, you can
look at this and see the problems, right? You can see like first of all, they inset the drivers way into the wood. So the drivers have a big, the drivers are in like their own little sort of tube. And which for the woofer doesn't matter, but for that supposedly full range 10-inch driver, and a 10-inch full range driver, you might have some kind of response up to 20 kilohertz, but it's going to beam like crazy. It's going to be like a flashlight with the higher frequencies, right?
Yeah.
And then of course this is open back, which is another big sort of trend nowadays because it gets rid of the boxy sound. However, I've not yet heard, maybe I've heard one. I don't know. I've not heard a lot of these open back speakers that have anything close to a flat frequency response. And I don't know. I don't know that much about open back speakers, but because there aren't, that many kicking around. It's strictly a high-end audio thing. There are not, to the best of my recollection, a lot of, mass market open back speakers.
No.
But the idea is it'll be more spacious sounding. It'll be more like a panel speaker, like a Martin Logan, where it's dipolar. It blows both ways, and the back wave's out of phase with the front wave, and it gives you this big spacious sound. However, it's hard to get a lot of deep bass power out of these. These have a 15-inch woofer, so they might be getting something. But they're just with a 10-inch full range driver like this in an open back enclosure, in a little tube thing, there's no way this thing is going to sound even remotely close to flat. Now that's fine, but the what's going on here is not like somebody's doing a lot of research and determining this is the best speaker. They may think they are, but really what people are doing is what are all the trends for the really super way out there audiophiles? And I will just sort of make a speaker that encompasses all those trends.
Yeah.
So full range driver, open back, weird wood construction and stuff. And but you know what? Music comes out, right? Presumably.
Yeah.
And the music is John Coltrane does not suddenly sound like Ace Cannon.
And I think if normies walked into your living room and you had a pair of these, they'd be like, "Oh, what are those?" And it would start a conversation for sure. I mean, it would start a conversation in the way my golden ear Triton 1Rs don't. Because people walk in and they know, okay, that's a speaker. It makes sound. I think they would walk in and look at these and go, "What the heck is going on there?"
Yeah,
that could be cool.
Yeah. So it's weird. It's functional only in that sound comes. I mean, look, people sit there and say, "Oh, you have to listen to it." And like, no, I don't. I mean, if you really know speakers, you can't tell everything about a speaker by looking at it, but someone who really understands how speakers work can look at the design, look at the driver choice, look at the crossover slopes, and figure out, and this thing kind of doesn't have any crossover slopes, I guess, and kind of tell you roughly what it's going to sound like. And this is going to be a long way from flat. This is going to color the music substantially. However, the way I fell in love with music was by listening to very colored speakers decades ago.
Man, for me, it was a one speaker AM FM clock radio on the top of the refrigerator, with fake wood sides. Yeah.
Was it tube though? Was it tube?
No, it wasn't tube. But it did have it had the kind of clock where like it looked like a digital, but it wasn't a digital because it just like flipped down transparent pages for each
those
to change
things.
the numbers.
I remember those. Those were great. Yeah. I had one of those in college.
Yeah.
I loved it. I took the case off of it and put it on these weird little legs. So it was kind of like an art piece.
Oh, cool.
All the guts were hanging out of it. See, I'm a maker. And
an artisan.
All right.
Let's go artisan.
So, I wanted to talk also, they had a thing from Amps and Sound, which as a former, headphone guru, this is a company I used to kind of follow because they made like some really nice handmade tube amps that were mostly designed to drive headphones. And they made a few like super low powered speaker amps. But now I was shocked. And all their stuff was like $2,000-$3,000, right? I was shocked to see that he's showing his Arches monoblocks. This is another Kim McAuliffe article, by the way. He's showing his Arches monoblocks at $50,000 a pair. And he's also showing his preamp at $35,000. I was just like, oh my God, he figured out where the money is.
Yep. Oh, he's going to have a nice boat.
He figured out that, for some, don't ask me to explain this, but I guess at these audio shows, there's a lot of people that go to these audio shows and want to find a $50,000 amp to go buy.
Yeah.
And I mean, certainly, you have an elite clientele here in the Washington, D.C. area, as we discussed. So, I mean, you probably wouldn't do too good with this gear in Des Moines, Iowa. Nothing against Des Moines, Iowa, but I just don't think this kind of stuff sells that great in places like Des Moines. There's probably a few people that have it, but it's not
a little more practical. Yeah.
This is more of a, the audiophile market, I think, is certainly more urban and more. Obviously, nowadays, I mean, yes, you can go buy really good sounding stuff for cheaper than ever before in, inflation adjusted dollars. But so much of the high end audio market and so much of what goes on at these shows is focused on this super, super expensive equipment. And I'm just I guess I'm disappointed in a way in that, this is a guy who was making $3,000 stuff and now he's making super, super expensive stuff because he realized like, okay, that's where the bucks are. I'll do that. And I'm sure he's still making the cheaper stuff, but it's like, well, if I'm leaving money on the table if I don't make a $50,000 pair of monoblocks.
Yeah, that's really sad. Anyway, buddy, you want to move on, man? Or I guess we should wrap it.
Can I talk about another speaker?
Yeah, do it, man.
Because, I like talking about speakers. So this is one, let's just make this our last one. Then we'll do our Patreon segment. So this is a speaker that I was surprised to find. I have not seen these before. This is, what are these called? It's Old Forge Audio.
Oh, I forgot about these.
And which makes me mad because they spell it OLD Forge. They should have spelled it OLDE Forge to give it more of the vintage vibe. But anyway,
or Ye Old Forge. Ye Old Forge would have even been better.
Yes, and in like whatever that typeface is that they use for that, and anyway, they're talking about the Heretic AD 614, which is 72.90 a pair, and this sort of coaxed me into a rabbit hole, which happens sometimes with Stereophile and me, and you know. I was surprised to find that like the AD in the 614 stands for Art Dudley, who's a now deceased Stereophile columnist who also started a magazine called Listener that was revered. And Art Dudley was kind of what kind of fictional character would you liken him to?
Ooh. I don't know. That's a good question.
He was a sort of mystical character. He's a very nice guy. I met him twice. And but he tended to like a lot of really wackadoodle audio gear, but he was good at explaining why he liked it, I guess, which is why people liked him as a writer. And he's really revered in a way that you and I will never be,
right?
For whatever reason,
maybe Radagast the Brown.
I don't know who that is.
He was the brown wizard from Middle Earth. So Gandalf was the gray, and Saruman was the white. Radagast was the brown, and he was the one that was like a little bit more granola crunchy, kind of a hippie wizard. I don't remember
that from the movie.
Oh, he was in the god awful Hobbit movie, but yeah.
Oh, I hated. I watched the first one. I hated it.
Oh yeah, hopefully you blocked that from your memory. But yeah, no, go read your Tolkien if you really want to know Radagast as an actual character, not a.
Wait, those movies are based on books? Are they any good?
Oh yeah, they're really good.
Huh. Okay. Good to know. Anyway, he was a sort of mystical wizard character, I guess. Anyway, but he liked a lot of really wacky audio gear, and he was absolutely convinced that frequency response didn't matter that much, and other things mattered much more. Which we'll talk about that in a minute. But anyway, I'm looking at the speaker, and he's talking about, Herb Reichert reviewed it, and it's his favorite speaker. And he's got he's helpful link here to Herb Reichert's review of this speaker. And so I'll describe the speaker. It is a box. It is kind of a generic looking box. It looks like something from 50 years ago. It looks like something my dad would have built, because my dad actually did build his own speakers. And it looks kind of like that.
It looks like maybe something that would have been used at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory or something like that.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. So they have, 10-inch drivers? They're big drivers. They're 10-inch or 12-inch drivers with a tweeter, concentrically mounted. And the language that starts to get into here is in this review is it almost sounds like there's an article that Jeff Morrison and I did for Sound and Vision that was supposed to be a parody of high-end audio, right?
Lurpa Labs.
And a Lurpa Labs article where, it was like just very sort of just crackpot nonsense. And I wrote like the prequel to it. Jeff wrote the full review. I wrote the prequel of like how we supposedly met the guy in Las Vegas and all of his ideas, and how he basically said that, all of the, and this guy was really like jingoistic and stuff. And he was basically saying that all of the, prevailing speaker ideas came from Canada, which is a socialist country. And that's basically like asking Fidel Castro how you should design a speaker. And, and how, ridiculous, all the standards. So there's a line, I'm still looking for it in this review, that sounds like something Jeff or I wrote as a parody about basically how, this Hang on, I'm coming to it. I am coming to it.
I think I found it. I think I
What's
found
the
it.
line?
Let me see if this is the line that you're thinking of. From one look at their raw-looking cabinets, it was obvious that Heretic's founder and chief engineer, Robert Gabori, is that I pronounced correctly?
Probably, yeah.
Created the AD614 in willful contradiction of every protocol of today's speaker design orthodoxy. Is that the line?
Yes. Yes, because orthodoxy is bad. Orthodoxy bad.
Yeah.
So like
consistency and science bad.
I know. It's like I hate it when the doctor tells me like, dude, you're like in your 60s, you should stop eating so much salt and sugar. Like that's just your orthodoxy. What do you know? A quote unquote expert.
Yeah. This is like Danny Ritchie calling people flat earthers when they don't believe in $9,000 power cables.
But this is why like Stereophile, I used to say when John Atkinson was running Stereophile, now he's just the technical editor. Well, now he is the technical editor, not just the technical editor. He's the technical editor, but he was the editor in chief and effectively the technical editor. And I used to say Stereophile was like a clown car being driven by Neil deGrasse Tyson.
That's a clown car I want to ride in, man.
And then you had this brilliant technical mind running the show, but then all this just like wackadoodle crap, this wackadoodle anti-intellectual, anti-science nonsense. Yeah. But the funny thing is, I look at these speakers and I'm like, yeah, that could work. So what's weird about them is, first of all, they got a really big driver with, it's concentric with a tweeter in the middle. Well, Tannoy's been doing that for decades, right?
Yeah.
And, is it my favorite design? Do I think it's acoustically the best thing to do? No. But does it kind of work okay? Yeah, it's okay. And it talks about how here's one paragraph that I'll come back to this, but it talks about how he moved the tweeter crossover down to 1.7 kilohertz. Okay, well, in that case, the dispersion of that 10-inch or whatever woofer is going to start to really narrow up around there. But by bringing the crossover point down to 1.7 kilohertz, then you start going to the tweeter, which has really broad dispersion at that frequency. And then you get you can have a nice smooth transition. And the designer says, I cross at 1.7 kilohertz, which is a bit under the point where this tweeter starts to feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So he's like, he knows what he's doing. He gets it.
Yeah.
He's acknowledging it, and presumably he chose a speaker or a tweeter that's not going to completely blow up on all the time, because then his customers would be mad. And he uses the Linkwitz-Riley crossover, which, of course, as we all know, a Linkwitz-Riley crossover is basically fourth order Linkwitz-Riley is cascaded second order Butterworth, which I obviously like. Which has my full endorsement.
Yeah.
Even though it was invented like 100-something years ago. But anyway, there's nothing, and there's a lot of wacky stuff about parallel crossover, store energy and release it, blah, 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 blah. And all this just crazy stuff. And then they start talking about, Herb Reichert talks about, his friend David Chesky, and, hats off to David Chesky, one of my favorite people in the whole business. Is totally cool guy, brilliant musician, brilliant recording engineer.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know that he'd be the guy I go to for, audio research, but he'd probably be good at it if he tried. But so my friend David Chesky and I believe that humans are way more sensitive to distortion and timing than frequency response.
Why do you appeal to authority there? Why couldn't he just say, I believe that? Like what?
Well, because David Chesky's awesome. Everybody loves David Chesky.
He's awesome, but
it's appeal to authority. So you were very right to point out that is a logical fallacy right there. But I had an idea. Call me. This is a crazy idea.
Ooh, I love it already.
What if you formed an organization that would that would maybe encourage and publish research into what parts of audio product performance humans are most sensitive to, so you could settle topics like whether are humans more sensitive to distortion and timing than frequency response. And I had an idea. Call me crazy. You could call it
like a society. Yeah.
You could call it the Audio Engineering Society.
Wow, that's on the
And then
nose.
maybe they could publish papers on, and people could, like scientists could actually research this and find out, like through blind testing, what parts of this that humans are most sensitive to.
Yeah.
So, I mean, maybe it's possible.
It'll never fly.
I hope this happens someday. I hope that Stereophile, starts to, publish this kind of research and writers can then, cite that research in their articles. I think that would be really cool and useful, because they're just sort of, they're just sort of speculating. I mean, what were their testing procedures? What did Herb do to test this? It's like, come on, Stereophile. So we're joking here, but like, come on, Stereophile. It's like this research has been out for 25 years plus.
Yeah.
And we're still sitting here pretending. I mean, and there's specific research that shows that distortion is really not very important. And there's specific research that shows that phase is not really very important, except in some cases. Yeah. And it's like, come on, there's papers just sitting there. And granted, being a member of the AES costs you, what are they up to?
$75 a year, I think?
No, it's more. It's like 100, 120 a year.
Oh, okay.
Which I still happily pay, because all that research is right there waiting for me, and I can read up in the journal and see what people are researching. But more important, I can look on any topic and go like, I wonder what somebody said about how audible, distortion is. And then you can go like, tick, 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 and you'll find a bunch of papers, but you'll find the one that Steve Timme and Sean Olive and other people did a couple of years ago that basically says, not very important, except when it's really bad.
There's a problem with that, though, Brent.
What's that?
The problem with it is, you and I have frequently talked about the sort of guru approach to audiophilia, audio journalism, and so forth, right? And anything you do to promote what the AES is doing, anything you do to encourage people to read Dr. Toole's book and to read AES papers and things like that takes a little bit of mojo away from the gurus. If these things work in a predictable way, if speakers are designed based on scientific principles, then you don't need a guru tastemaker to say, I have listened to this speaker and I have deemed it to be acceptable to my cult, right? So, embracing AES, embracing the research, embracing the science sort of undermines a big part of the model of how all of this stuff is communicated.
Of course it does. Of course it does. And honest to God, some of this mystical approach is kind of more fun than the Floyd Toole approach. But you can do both, right? You don't have to sit here and say nonsense like humans are way more sensitive to distortion and timing than frequency response, which we know is false. Yeah. Okay. You can be, I don't know, me, and you can look at the speaker and go, well, that's a little different. But frankly, I don't know how it performs. I'd love to measure these things and see exactly what that port does. And the guy's claiming that it's effective over a much larger area and doesn't have the sort of resonance and stuff that a normal port does. I don't know, but I'd love to measure that and find out. You could find out real quick with one sweep. But I look at these and go like, I'd like to hear what these sound like. And these look like they would be kind of fun to listen to, and they're fine. And I don't need to make up a bunch of crap or deny science to say that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we should probably wrap this up. We have ranted enough about this. I feel bad because neither of us went to the show. We both should have been there. Maybe next year.
Maybe next year, yeah.
I'm going to go to more shows next year. I have made up my mind, no matter what my life presents to me, as long as I'm still alive and still able to speak, I'm going to go to some more shows next year.
Very cool. So, all right, buddy. Well, let's say that this was a Butterburger production, and
it was.
And I'm doing all the kit and caboodle this week. I did the engineering, I'm doing the mixing, I'm doing the mastering. Heaven forfend, I'm doing the editing. This one's going to be a bear.
Come on.
Yeah. What do we decide about music?
we're going to dredge some stuff. I have some projects in the works that I think are, I have specifically 2 things in the works that I think are both going to turn out really good, but they're not done. They're not even at a stage where I can throw together some noise for you. So we're going to have to reach into the archives.
We can do it.
We'll see
what
that
is. A pretty good archive going. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. All right. Well, everybody, we will we'll see you in a couple of weeks, and share this with your favorite ants, because it's a holiday season. And it's all about sharing. And patrons, stick around. We'll see you in a minute.
See ya.
Hey, thanks for sticking around to the end. If you liked what you heard and wish there'd been a little bit more of it, we got some good news for you.
Indeed, we do. If you check out patreon.com/Audio Unleashed, all one word, you can get new episodes a little earlier than everybody else.
And sometimes it's like a day or 2 early. Sometimes it's nearly a week. We never really know until we start editing.
But the big plus is that you get extended cuts of every episode. And usually that's going to mean a whole extra segment that's about maybe a geekier topic, or something that's a little more personal to us, or something that's just going to really appeal to the hardcore Audio Unleashed listener.
Yeah, what it boils down to is, if you're somebody who would support Audio Unleashed on Patreon, we're going to make sure the bonuses to every episode are really aimed straight at your interests.
Yeah. And so if you want to hear these segments, you can subscribe to our Patreon for $3 a month, which is less than I spend every single day on my cup of coffee when I go to Starbucks to write my boring articles.
Yeah. One more time with that URL, that's patreon.com/Audio Unleashed.
Or Audio
Unleashed. Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.